Hello and welcome back to Mr. Caro Plays FM26. Today we're going to look at free agents. We're going to look at how to search for them, players that I recommend, and also how to search for those players that could become free agents throughout the season. Roll the footage. Okay, so our game has loaded. Now, for this example, I have used Burnley. However, you could essentially, we're kind of aiming these kind of players, lower Premier League teams or maybe higher Championship teams and then equivalents in different leagues. The reason why that's important is because when we look at the star ratings of these players, some of them are going to be rated lower, and it doesn't mean they're not good players to have as a free agent. They're just obviously maybe too good for Burnley. But that's not necessarily the point of the video. The video is more to specify players that we can sign. Now, if we go to our squad, you can see if you looked in the news articles there, we have got a lot of these players on trial. Now, what I have done is I have effectively built a first 11 full of free agents, and we're going to focus on a couple. Now, one thing you'll notice looking on the screen is that there's a lot of older players within that. Now, obviously, when we think about that, we are thinking about why are we signing free agents? We're signing free agents to bolster our team, to better our team, but maybe some of these players have maybe not got long-term futures. And now that is kind of typical when you start the game. Now, after a couple of seasons, some of the more younger players become available as a free agent as the game kind of gets going. But let's not forget that when the game starts, it literally is players left over from real life. And typically those players are a little bit older, especially when the database started. So if we pick our first player, we're going to look at a goalkeeper and we're going to look at Fraser Forster. Now, he is a player who played for Tottenham last season. He is 37 years old, so he's a little bit older. However, it is worth pointing out that he's pretty solid at that age. So whether you need a backup keeper or you want to look for maybe a goalkeeper who can challenge if you had an injury or something in that regard, he is certainly your player to have. Now, if you look at some of his key stats, his error reach is 19, so he's very good in the air at catching. Kicking, maybe not fantastic, but his handling is 14. His jump reach is 20, and his strength is 19. So you can see that he is very much a strong keeper. If you're in a kind of more dominant, more physical league like the Championship, for example, he will fare quite well, especially on those corners, because he's not going to necessarily be dropping that ball and creating those negative chances against. Also worth looking at, his bravery is 15 and his concentration is 17 and positioning also 17. So really some really great stats in there for a 37-year-old, and it is probably fair to say if he was a little bit younger, then those stats would be probably higher. But it's also worth pointing out this is saying, the star rating even should be higher. But like I said, we are Burnley and we're specifically looking at players in this realm. This is not necessarily a reflection of what needs to happen in the long term. This is a short-term idea. The next defender we're going to look at is a guy called Pape Cissé. Now, he is maybe one of the younger, best free agent defender signings you can make. There are lots of older players within that free agency, but not many younger players. And if we look at his kind of stats, his first touch is 10, his passing is 11, heading is 14, jumping reach and strength also very high. So maybe he's going to be that player who gets those goals from corners. Certainly a player to add. He's also with Senegalese international, 16 captain, 1 goal. Prior to being a free agent, I believe he played in the Middle East. Yeah, Qatar, Turkey, and then Greece. So not necessarily established as a player that jumps to mind initially. However, when we look at his stats, they are pretty good for that kind of age frame and the players available. One to note is Craig Dawson. I didn't point him out because of his age is substantially higher, and we're trying to focus maybe on the younger selection here, but he is a pretty solid, well-rounded, so much experience in the Premier League. Another great one for corners. His heading is 17, bravery 17, jumping reach 16, and the kind of really interesting one here is his natural fitness is 18. For a 34-year-old to have natural fitness of 18 means actually he kind of defies his age a little bit, in as much as he won't be a player who gets tired regularly, and his stamina is also 15. So yeah, he's a little bit slower, but if you're not needing a pacey defender and you want experience, he's definitely your man to get in. Now, prior to him being a free agent, he played 15 games for Wolves last season. He's played for West Ham. I believe he's also played for West Brom and Watford in the Premier League. So he's got so much experience in the Premier League. Next player we're going to have a quick look at is a guy called Rafinha. He used to be fantastic on FIFA. and he has played quite well on FM over the years as well. He's played for PSG. He has played for Barcelona. I think he has played a couple of games for Brazil. Yeah, 2 games for Brazil. But if we look at his stats, you can see that he is someone who's going to create you chances. Now, obviously, he's 32 years old, so maybe an older one in the selection. However, first touch 16, passing 16, technique 17, vision 16. Really solid stats to kind of build your attack around. Now, again, not someone maybe for multiple years, but if we look at how much wages he's going to be asking, for example, for this, he's asking, it's a little bit pricey on the 49,000, but if you've got the money to make that happen, I'm sure we can contest a little bit and bring that down. We can 44 to 55. So if you've got a little bit of wage budget left in your budget at the start of the season, he is certainly someone to look into. Now, if we move down the line and we're looking at our offensive players, now it is easy to consider Douglas Costa. I'm actually surprised he comes out so strongly. Last season, he was playing in Australia. Not saying knocking that league, but you might assume that that would depreciate his ability. But if we look, he's still got dribbling 17, first touch 17, and then you've got technique 18. Now, it is worth pointing out his stamina is only 9, but his pace is still 14 and the acceleration. So maybe he's not a player to start the games, and natural fitness is also not the greatest. So maybe not a player to start the games, but if you want that kind of impact substitute, Douglas Costa would certainly be a good player to throw in there. Now, we're going to go down and we're going to look at striking. Now, this is a harder one to choose because actually there are quite a lot of older players within here. If we look down, we've got Falcao in there. You've got Mikel Antonio. I think Diego Costa was also an option, but I didn't get him in. So I've actually picked an Iranian guy. I can't pronounce his name. Giadi, I'm going to go with. He is an interesting player, but if you play him up front, you can also play him on the wing. He is going to be playing kind of as that a channel forward. But his acceleration is 16, balance is 16, agility 18, natural fitness is a little low, and actually weirdly pace is quite low. I don't understand that entirely, but he is definitely a player who's got kind of more of an attacking flair. So maybe a winger more than a striker, but he does have those kind of stats within there. Now, if we look at one other striker, let's actually look at Falcao. Now, obviously, Falcao is going to be a very particular signing if you get him. He is going to be a substitute striker. I don't think that people should be signing him as being their main striker, not unless they can somehow get him for a lower championship team. However, if you look at his stats, he's undeniable in his finishing at 17, composure at 18, determination 16, decision 15. Pretty much everything that would be great in there. And also free kick 14 and penalty taken 18. And he will get you goals. So I almost guarantee Falcao will score goals. However, I don't believe he's going to be a striker from the top. Now, there was a couple of other players we tried to get in who wouldn't come, and we're going to look at our shortlist here. And if we go to our free agents shortlist, possibly the best free agent, I don't believe he'll stay that way after the January transfer update, but possibly the best free agent you can get is Renan Lodi. I don't know, I'm butchering his name perhaps, but he is, look at his stats. This is a free agent. He's easily going to get evaluation in the Premier League of maybe in the high, maybe even like 10 million pounds once a free agency goes through. But his crossing is 15, dribbling 16, first touch 14, technique 14, pace isn't the greatest, but acceleration is up there with 15, and his natural fitness is 13, which could be better, but the overall package is there, especially if you want kind of a player to, not necessarily to be your first choice left back or your first choice left midfielder, but someone to fill in those kind of extra spaces. He could certainly do that. And to be honest with those stats, maybe he could even be your starting player. Now, what also I wanted to show was actually something that is very missed in FM when it comes to the free agency is what happens in January. Now, we know that the MLS season finishes in December and a lot of players become free agents. What we can do is we can go to our player database and we can go to our edit search. And if we wanted to pick that January, because it's already selected in there, we want to pick our contract status and we want to put that to depending on when you are, of course. But say we wanted to go to January and we start the season, it's fair to say expiring in 6 months is probably what we want. And then you can see that there are some players being populated. Now, they're players that I have already scouted. However, if you click apply in there and click off the scouting, you'll see that it slowly populates that list full of players. And in fact, 357 of them. Now, I tend to want to narrow that search. If you did want to do a specific league search, you could add in condition and then you could choose it in there. I believe it's in division or somewhere in that realm, club maybe in division. So you could go to the MLS in there, for example. We'll do that just for argument's sake. Now, it is worth pointing out I don't have the MLS selected in my database. I wanted to show how many players you could get from the basic, maybe just loading the Premier League. Basically, all I loaded is England, and these are the players I got. So if you obviously broaden that search, you will get more players, but I wanted to show for the low-performing PCs, if you like, the players that you could find. Now, we're looking at MLS specifically because we know this league finishes in January or finishes in December and players become available in January. However, there's the Swedish league and the Canadian league, etc., that also follow a similar pattern. So I guess the argument say the idea is you work out when those leagues finish and you kind of utilize those kind of player approaches. Now, generally, when it's this little time in advance, we can actually make offers from the off. You can see that I've narrowed the search to a couple of the better players we can see in there. And then this dude, for example, here, he is 19 years old and he is I scouted him in advance for the video. And you can see that if we were a team of Burnley stats, for example, or, reputation, you could sign him and he would be pretty much ready to go very soon. Hopefully, at the age of 19, maybe you loan him out. He would be good to go relatively soon. And you can see that his wage demand is incredibly low. You kind of be stupid not to pick up this player, to be honest, when you consider the wage demand is so low. Now, there are another couple of players in there. Obviously, these are just players I searched out. There's a couple of goalkeepers because we had quite a weak goalkeeper selection in our free agency. You could get this guy here, for example. I don't know if he would come to Burnley, but he is 34 years old, so maybe slightly older, but he does have some great stats within that. Certainly worth considering. He's a ball-playing goalkeeper, which is fantastic. We know goalkeepers go on for a little longer than outfield players, so it is worth keeping that in mind. Now, that is pretty much where we're at when it comes to players expiring in advance. If we bring that back up, I just wanted to show one more thing. Now, in here, for example, we want to select players that are available now. If we do that and we go unattached, you can see that that's, again, bringing up the scouted players. But if we click that off, it's bringing up 610 potential players. Now, what I will typically do here, and this is just my own way of narrowing the search. Like I said, there are other ways to do that, but I typically go for international caps, and then I will put in one, and you can see that it brings that down substantially. Now, it is not necessarily a precise science because we know that lots of players don't play international football and are very good. However, if you've got such a broad search and you don't have a lot of time and you are already scouting free agency, but you want to have a quick overview, it is worth using a filter such as international appearances to try and bring down that amount of players in there. And you can see it brought it down to 92 players. Because the logic being, if they played international football, not necessarily going to be better, but you're going to pick up certain players within that, a certain quality of players within that, which will certainly help you. Now, it is also worth pointing out you can knock this out completely if you wanted to, and just click off and go not considered. And that will, again, potentially bring up the search again, because you're allowing yourself to see more players. And I think it's transfer only and just having it like that, So that will bring back more players and it'll bring back everybody. Players that are interested and players that aren't interested. Now, if you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe. Hit the notification button to see when videos are released. Thank you and goodbye.